Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar presented by the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton. My name is John Wishart. I'm the CEO of the Chamber, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Today, we're very pleased to have with us Kent Estabrooks. Kent is the Vice President for New Brunswick with the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. Kent has 30 years experience working with the federal government, after a number of years also in the private sector. So he can see both sides of the private-public environment. And Kent is here today to speak with us about the new Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, which has delivered some much-needed financial assistance to Atlantic Canada. As you can see from the slide, the title for today's webinar is Resilience, Mitigation, and Recovery, how ACOA's COVID-19 assistance can help your business. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue à cette rencontre virtuelle présentée par la Chambre de commerce pour le Grand Moncton. Mon nom est John Wishart, je suis le PDG de la Chambre et je serai le modérateur de la session aujourd'hui. Nous avons la chance de voir avec nous M. Kent Estabrooks, vice-président de l'Agence de promotion économique du Canada Atlantique. After Kent's presentation, we hope to have some time left for a Q&A. Just to note that everyone's microphones have been muted, but you can post a question at any time during the presentation by using the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So without further ado, we'll get to the presentation. Kent, it's great to have you with us today, and it's over to you.
Well, thank you, John, and good morning, everyone. Avant de commencer, j'aimerais souligner que mes commentaires aujourd'hui seraient en anglais pour la plupart. Toutefois, je vous invite de me poser vos questions dans la langue de votre choix et j'y répondrai à la suite de ma présentation. So I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all, and this follows a meeting that our Minister Joly, had a few weeks ago with the Moncton Chamber. Since that meeting, we have announced and launched our new program. And so there are a number of updates to provide you. And so this meeting's fairly timely in that respect. And I've got a little bit of a presentation that I'm going to share with you all. It's probably going to be around 30 minutes. There should be plenty of time, though, for questions at the end. And let me just share my screen now. Make sure everyone can see it. Okay, just a thumbs up, maybe from you, John, if you can see that. Okay, good. Awesome. All right. So as John mentioned, my role is Vice President, responsible for overseeing the operations of ACOA in New Brunswick. So it's in that context that I'm presenting today. Before I jump into the presentation, though, I do want to start by recognizing the really excellent work done by the chambers across Atlantic Canada and in New Brunswick. The Moncton Chamber has certainly risen to the challenge, supporting the business community in the establishment of the Recovery Task Force. And I think in these times, cooperation, sharing of information, and especially considering how quickly things are evolving so rapidly, has become really essential. And so I did want to shout out a little bit to the Chamber on that. And I also wanted to mention, with respect to the business community, I think it's important to recognize how far we've come in such a short period of time. We're 10 weeks in now, and in many respects, what we're seeing is a complete sort of pivot for some businesses in that period of time. And I think that really speaks to the tremendous leadership potential that we have and the capabilities that we have. And I think it's important to take stock of that now before we kind of roll into the next set of challenges that are coming our way. So just a moment on that. So I'm just going to start into my presentation now. So some of you may be already familiar with ACOA, but I suspect some are not. So I thought I'd take a moment to go over who we are and how we fit into the federal picture. ACOA is part of a national network federal network of regional development agencies across the country. And many of them are structured fairly differently. They deliver slightly different mandates depending on where they're located. But one thing they have in common is that they basically are organized around the local economic situation. So the local opportunities and any kind of local threats that may emerge, they're there to respond in a unique way across the country. For our part at ACOA in the Atlantic, we've always looked to work with our provincial partners, including the chambers here in New Brunswick, Opportunities New Brunswick, Community Business Development Corporations, and all the other NGOs that are out there. And we're looking not to replace any efforts that are already underway, but rather to complement them and to accelerate them in some cases. And so we've been really closely monitoring the COVID-19 impacts on regional businesses and local economies. We have a lot of points of contact, officers throughout the province, including here in Moncton. And so we're trying to collect up information from those clients in terms of what are they experiencing and how are they reacting to this. But also we have a line of sight on the full suite of federal programs that are coming out. And from day one, we've migrated to working remotely. We haven't been in our traditional offices as many of you are also experiencing. We are virtually connected. Our staff have been continuously engaged in conversations with stakeholders. And we've been collecting up information from the clients and feeding it into Ottawa in terms of our perspective on what the Atlantic is experiencing. And there's been, as I'm sure everyone's noticed, a tremendous amount of programs announced, both federally and provincially. And there are updates actually on a daily basis almost, and sometimes more than one a day. We've seen that these programs have been put together pretty quickly in order to get assistance out the door. But I would note that, and we would anticipate that going forward, all the feedback that we're feeding up and that's coming in from around the country is going to influence the way these programs get delivered as well. And so we will anticipate more and more changes kind of as we go forward. So this next slide really speaks to the agency's mandates, our spending and our priorities. And I won't spend a ton of time on this other than to say we have been around for over 30 years now. And in this time, we've established really good roots and relationships with our clients and other stakeholders. We deliver our own funding, core funding. We have around $275 million for the Atlantic. And this translates to around $80 million of programming here in New Brunswick. If we look at last year, and in a normal year, we do around 300 deals. And normally that's about 60% commercial for the agency and 40% for not-for-profit organizations and other governments. But we do more than fund projects. We also have a line of business where we bring stakeholders together. So thinking, academia, business, governments, NGOs, assemble them around various topics. In the past, we've done this for immigration. We've done a little bit for skills development. And we try and get strategies advanced around sectors of key importance for the region. So for us, that would include as well tourism. We have a food strategy that we're working on, which includes seafood and aquaculture and manufacturing more broadly, and a bunch of others as well. And so we are, as I mentioned, called upon to represent the interests of Atlantic Canada on the national scene as well. So as we understand what the priorities are and the opportunities, we feed that up to Ottawa to make sure that those are considered in any national programs or policies as they're developed. So we're going to keep some of this broad structure going forward, obviously, but currently, as many are, we're focused really on relief funds to mitigate the impact that we're feeling. And I'll get into that in a couple of slides. But before I do, just a brief moment on the programs that we have and the number of programs that we administer normally. only really going to reference two of these that are on this slide today that were impacted by last week's announcement. And these are the REGI, R-E-G-I, the Regional Economic Growth Renovation Fund, and the CFP, the Community Futures Program. So in Atlantic Canada, under that fund, the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund that was announced last week, those two programs that I just mentioned were topped up by $110 million to deal with COVID-related impacts in Atlantic Canada. What that translates, we believe, for New Brunswick is something in the order of $33 million for this province. The REGI part of that, the Regional Economic Growth Renovation Fund, will be directly delivered by ACOA to end recipients, and those would be normal ACOA clients. And the CFP, the Community Futures Program, is funding that ACOA will receive to distribute among the 10 community business development corporations that are situated around the province. CBDCs normally have a mandate to deal with rural business, including Main Street businesses such as restaurants and retail and personal services. But for the purposes of this new programming, we are in discussions with them to provide assistance in urban areas as well, and that'll include Moncton. And this is much the same as they're currently doing with the provincial funding that they've been given for a similar purpose. So we wanted to make sure we used a familiar face, not to complicate the landscape too much. So I'm going to move to the next slide. In terms of adjustments that we've made to our existing program offering, we've done a few things. We have automatically deferred repayment without clients needing to ask. So we've deferred for 3 months. We are closely monitoring this, and we'll adjust that further if the need arises. We are looking as well at our own process and our programs much more closely to make sure that they're as flexible as they can be in response to what businesses need. And so in that respect, we've adopted a new working capital program when we really look to streamline our internal processes to have quicker response times to clients. And then also, given the number of programs that are coming through federally and provincially, we are dedicating a significant amount of our time to understanding those programs and to relaying that information to clients. We'll talk about that again in a minute. In addition to that, we're proactively bringing some organizations together to come up with some creative solutions to some of the unique challenges that are posed by the current crisis, including helping companies adapt their production processes to make PPE, personal protective equipment, not just for health professionals, but for other businesses that are coming on stream now who need them. And so there's a number of businesses that have pivoted that way. And so we're looking to create an inventory of those, to create opportunities for those businesses to sell those products. And as well, we're providing, in some cases, funding in order for those businesses to be able to make that pivot. And speaking of the various programs that that are being offered, as I said earlier, there's a lot of them, and they are evolving continuously. So in support of trying to navigate those numerous offerings, we're helping out in that way in a few ways. We are working with the province's business navigator service and coordinating very closely with them in terms of the information that we receive and that they receive to make sure that that's available no matter which number you call. We do have a Canada Business Call Center that we manage at ACOA. We have provided additional infrastructure and additional personnel to handle inbound calls for that organization. And we've developed some tools for our frontline staff, for the economic development officers out in the field, to talk when they're talking with clients. They're able to kind of navigate in terms of the sequencing of these programs, how they're meant to be administered, and key contact and key tombstone information for those. I won't get into all the programs that are available today, but I do think some of them do need to be highlighted. And the reason for that is the new programming that ACOA has received is meant to fill gaps that haven't already been filled by some existing programs that are out there that have been previously announced. And so in particular, many may be familiar with the Canada Emergency Business Account that provides up to 40,000 of working capital, of which 10,000 can be forgiven if repaid before December 31st, 2022. So that previously was open to businesses who had payroll expenses between 20,000 and 1.5 million. But this updated earlier this week, it's going to include sole proprietors who are receiving income differently other than through payroll expense. And so that we would drive folks to these programs first, and then if they're not able to qualify or if their needs exceed those, we'll take a look. In addition, there's business credit availability program through BDC and some backed by EDC, Export Development Corporation. There's the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, which is just coming online now. Applications are going to be, I think, accepted on Monday, for including for Atlantic Canada for certain tenancy requirements. And there's the fairly involved program, but it's coming on stream here shortly. Also, there is the wage subsidy that has also been announced to provide up to 75% for businesses that show decreases in revenues of 15% for March and 30% April, May, and June. And that this last week has been extended beyond the current sunset of June until the end of August to enable businesses to ramp back up in many parts of the country. And then in addition to all of that assistance that's available to business, there is the CERB, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or EI for self-employed individuals, which would be normally available for very small businesses that either aren't incorporated or don't have a traditional payroll. And so all of those, the collection of those programs, we have information on. We are going to direct people to those first, and then we're going to take a look to see what gaps are remaining. So, with respect to our program that was announced last week, this is going to be administered by the various RDAs, the regional development agencies across the country. They said it's a complementary measure. So if you haven't qualified for the normal suite of programs, or if you have qualified and you still have needs that haven't been met, that's the kind of sweet spot that we're aiming to hit. So the assistance for business, and I'm going to go through some of the details on this. This is a very high-level summary slide, but I've got a lot of details here that I will go through. And again, there's questions, I'd be happy to take them at the end, or we've got a number of staff who have all these details as well. So assistance for business is meant to be generally repayable. So if you're a business, it's we are expecting repayment, although there will be for these repayable contributions a 2-year grace period. So you don't have to pay us back for 2 full years. So you don't start until January 1st, 2023. It is to be fully repaid, though, normally by December 31st, 2025. So there's a 3-year repayment window at the back end. There is a provision for us to mirror the assistance for the Canada Emergency Business Account, where up to 25% of 40,000 or 10,000 can be forgivable if it's repaid by the end of 2022. So if businesses have not been able to access that type of funding, we are able to mirror that type of funding. So that would be the only exception on the repayment for business. Assistance provided to non-commercial applicants And included here as a special category are not-for-profit entities that provide technical support to businesses to help them mitigate COVID-19 impacts. Those will be non-repayable. And so it's not all non-commercial applicants that are eligible for assistance under the program, but those who are assisting businesses to help them through this are going to be targeted by this program. And so businesses need to demonstrate some financial hardship due to COVID-19 impact. And as I mentioned before, have not been able to access federal support measures or continue to experience hardship despite having access to those measures. Businesses will also be required to describe their plan for business continuity to bridge the gap between today and recovery. And so in that respect, we're going to be requiring some cash flow projections for 6 months as well as recent financials. Each application will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So, slide 8. We are now accepting online applications. ACOA is going to continue to accept these until March 31st, 2021, or until the funding is depleted, whichever comes first. Applications are going to be expedited as quickly as possible. And just an example there, the requests for under 100,000 that are in good order may be processed and approved by ACOA with a fairly quick turnaround. We're hoping up 10 days turnaround. So, and I would mention as well that upon signing an agreement, we can advance up to 50% of approved assistance right away and have that in the hands of clients. And the remaining assistance would be paid through a claim process. So the kinds of costs that we'll look at can include rent, lease payments, salaries, property taxes, utilities, bank interest, insurance, other fixed overhead costs, and what we're terming one-time stabilization expenditures, and those can include COVID-related mitigation or PPE or anything like that that the companies need to outlay in order to start back up. Non-eligible costs, though, include such things as refinancing of existing debt and land. So those kinds of things would not be eligible. We can provide up to 100% of eligible costs in those categories that I mentioned. And I might also mention that businesses in sectors that are critical to the resilience and the survival of our economy, such as advanced manufacturing, ocean industries, clean growth, tourism, we may be giving those industries priority. And in addition, we'll be looking at businesses that are critical to the communities that they're in. Maybe they're major employers, they have a key economic presence in their community or in their sector, and so we may also give priority to those kinds of businesses. So ACOA and the CBDCs, depending on which door you're coming in through, are making every effort to extend this program to as many businesses as possible to ensure that no business is left behind. But we don't know at this point where the gaps are and what the overall demand is going to be. We're just getting started on this. But we do need to signal that demand for the funds may exceed what's available, so we'll have to adjust going forward. Since in that respect, since the announcement, I will say our Canada Business call center has handled, and this would have been in the last week or so, 570 inquiries from businesses across the region. But again, happy to take more detailed questions at the end of the presentation. But I would note, though, that just to summarize, the basic premise here is that we're here to fill gaps. And at this stage, because there's so many things that are available, we're really unsure of what the overall demand on the RRRF is going to be. And so again, I reiterate that we may need to adopt and then adjust and adapt our criteria going forward, depending on the amount of take-up. So in order to access this funding, current ACOA clients should contact their project officer that they've been assigned to discuss their specific needs. And then current CBDC clients, if you're in a rural area, should contact their CBDC. For all of their clients, and that would be non-ACOA clients in an urban area, such as Moncton, they should call the toll-free Canada business number that you see on the slide here, 1-888-576-4444, or email ACOA. And from there, we'll direct you to the appropriate resource. Just moving on, going forward, up to now in this presentation, I've described what we're doing for mitigation efforts. However, we are starting to look at potential recovery measures and what businesses may need in the future. And we do anticipate that priorities will shift as we come out of this. And we want to make sure that we're aiming our investments in the right way to help companies grow and remain competitive as we move forward. So we're currently engaging stakeholders on initiatives, and this is just an example, in digital infrastructure and also in cold storage. And in a number of these other areas that are highlighted on the screen. But I'll highlight a couple of those. And I think this crisis has really shone a light in terms of some of the gaps that we are seeing in digital infrastructure. This may be a really key opportunity and an interesting time to look at what the overall needs will be kind of going forward. And as well, with respect to food security and the impact that this has had on markets and on production capacity for food. Food security has become a big issue. And so cold storage for food within the province for both seafood and agriculture are a key concern at this time. And so we're looking at the broader picture of what's needed, not just now, but perhaps in the future in terms of what we need for to kind of go forward. In terms of specifics for Main Street, you hear a lot about support for Main Street businesses. We're really interested in some of the buy local campaigns that we note that are on the rise. And in Moncton, we know that Brainworks has launched a free Love for Local campaign that's picked up quite a bit. There are similar efforts in other municipalities across the province, and we know as well that Excellence New Brunswick has launched a new Made in New Brunswick e-commerce site. We're really open to helping amplify these types of efforts, particularly given the border situation now, and a lot of the market that is available to businesses is local. And so by promoting that and by promoting staycations, another thing that we're looking at, we think these are going to be key parts of the early recovery efforts, especially in terms of keeping communities together, connected, and working together, and matching up businesses to where the revenues are, at least in the short term. And so we're working with although key local partners, the CBDCs, 3+, Downtown Moncton, and the 3 municipalities in terms of doing that. And we have a long-standing relationship with those partners, so we're really interested in supporting that effort going forward. We'd also like to highlight as well that we know that there's a number of businesses who want to reopen but aren't sure of the steps, and we'll highlight that Opportunities New Brunswick has launched a number of New Brunswick business webinar series to address those questions and concerns. They are recorded, and we invite you to check those out as you're looking to reopen. As well, there are a couple of other areas where we're coordinating efforts. E-commerce, of course, has become a key priority for a number of retailers and businesses, given the situation. And I understand the Chamber is delivering webinars in terms of how to adapt to this, but we would also highlight that we have provided some funding through LearnSpare, a New Brunswick-based business that has a couple of sessions coming online for both retail and restaurant services. These are available at no cost, and it basically outlines what is available in terms of tools and how one might adapt to moving more into that space. So I'm going to leave you with this contact information. I'm going to make the presentation available to John in donnera, and he will distribute those to others as well as you feel you may need them. What I want to just basically leave you with is there is no wrong door. We are seeing unprecedented cooperation, I think, within communities and between governments. We're really all leaning in to help businesses pathfind to the right solution for themselves. So you can call NB's Navigator, NB Brunswick's Navigator Program, or the Chamber or CBC or ACOA, and we'd all be really happy to help you. With that, thank you very much. Happy to open up the discussion and respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Kent, for the presentation and the information. As he said, it is now time for the Q&A part of the webinar. Please don't be shy. Just click on the chat button if you'd like to pose a question. C'est maintenant le temps pour les questions et réponses. Veuillez cliquer sur le bouton chat si vous souhaitez poser une question. The first question that we have, Kent, first of all, I was glad to hear you say that the presentation will be made available, and we'll share that with the participants and also post it on our website. And also, I should mention that the webinar is being recorded, so we'll also post that. We now have a growing Zoom library on our COVID-19 resource page, so this will be the latest one. Someone has asked a question, Kent, regarding support for charities and not-for-profits. What form might that take? Is it program support, or is it involve, improvements to facilities, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so the not-for-profit sector, as I mentioned, the primary through the RRRF, I should stipulate, is new programming. It is aimed at not-for-profits who provide technical support or services to those who businesses who are coming through this crisis. So it's COVID-19 related support that is aimed for this new program. That said, the not-for-profit sector, especially those that are in support of businesses, have been and continue to be eligible with ACOA clients. And so, but it needs to be, with respect to ACOA, it needs to be focused on business development. With respect to the broader not-for-profit programs, there's certainly the wage subsidy is available to those businesses. My understanding as well, the CEBA is available for those organizations. And I would suspect rent assistance, that kind of thing that's just coming on stream now, is also available. There may be some other federal programs as well, but I would encourage, again, the not-for-profit organizations to reach out to either the Navigator Service or Canada Business, and we'll be able to inventory for you the programs that may be relevant.
Thanks. I've got a couple of my own questions while we wait for others to pop up. One involves, you mentioned off the top that this funding is really meant to address the gaps in other programs. I'm sure for a lot of business owners, when they apply, they're hoping they don't reach a dead end and then have to restart with another program through Service Canada or CRA. Is there any mechanism for ACOA to help business owners say, okay, well, you don't really qualify for what we're offering, but we're going to transfer your file to somebody else?
Yeah, and so a couple of things we've done there. We have developed tools for frontline staff, which is basically an inventory we updated every single day in terms of what's available, what's coming out. And we are putting that in the hands of our frontline staff, so they have that available to them. We're also equipping the call center with that type of information. So, I would encourage you to reach out first. Reach out to ACOA, and we have the contact information. We are providing, in fact, we call them Zoominars. We do every week or so. We will invite a new partner in to talk about their programs, and we'll invite our frontline staff to come in and listen to those. And so they don't just have the paper; they also have some training that's provided through Zoom. on a regular basis. So we should be able to provide that to businesses coming in. And like I say, we want to, it's a no wrong door type philosophy that we're trying to adopt.
When Minister Jolie mentioned the program, she used the term that this is help for Main Street. And I saw one of your slides actually had a Main Street image on it. And you also mentioned the CBDCs, which traditionally have, I think, worked more in the rural areas,
Right.
might also play a role in the urban environment. Can you describe, is there specific funding to help, say, retailers or restaurants on downtown cores?
Yeah, and so these would be, and that's the intent, is that restaurateurs, retailers, services of a personal nature or of a social nature, those kinds of businesses that wouldn't normally be eligible ACOA clients, the expectation is that they are going to come through the CBDCs. The CBDCs have, while they're not typically operating in urban, those are their typical clientele for CBDCs in rural. And so our expectation is that they'll be able to deliver that. And they have been in the past few weeks, they have been delivering that service in urban with some provincial funding that they've been given to provide working capital to those businesses. So it's much in that same vein that we'll be offering our assistance to the CBDCs to do the same. We're just in the process of finalizing the agreements, imminent, so that we'll have this finalized and signed with them so that applications can start into CBDCs for that purpose.
You mentioned in describing the repayable loan versus grant portions that companies that demonstrate they're actually helping businesses recover from COVID-19 may get more of a grant than a loan. Can you describe how that might work, or what sorts of services they might have to provide to qualify?
Yeah, if they don't, it's not necessarily that they would get a grant under this program, but we would provide working capital assistance for that business to adapt its operations in order to pivot to go in that direction. Under the RRF, like I said, it's mostly repayable with the exception of the SIBO-like offering that we would have, which would provide up to $10,000 that's non-repayable. The other option that is available is around procurement services. So we're inventorying the number of businesses that are there, that are in this space, and looking to pathfind them to the appropriate procurement, be it federal, or we're working as well with provinces, to make sure that the list of provincial needs is matched up with the companies that are able to provide those. And furthermore, we're looking to expand that beyond government procurement into other businesses that need PPE just to start up opening again.
Right. Something that maybe is important for the business owners who are on the call to remember is that besides this extra funding, the Recovery and Relief Fund, ACOA has several existing programs that are available. And are there some that you think might be particularly useful for them at this point in time?
Yeah, I do. And I've mentioned, I highlighted through the presentation some things that through organizations such as LearnSphere or other not-for-profit, we're providing not just necessarily in working capital investments, but services that enable people to acquire skills that are around e-commerce or around adapting the business. And some of that through our regular programming actually is non-repayable. We have a productivity and business skills initiative program that can provide up to $50,000 of assistance that is at a time for acquiring new skills. And that can come from the form of bringing new people on board, or it can come from consulting as well.
And maybe one final question around the process and the timing. You mentioned it's a streamlined application process, and I know all these new government assistance programs have been put together in, well, record time for government, and take that the best way, and you've had to turn quickly. So you mentioned, I believe, you're looking at or hoping for a 10-day turnaround. Is that correct?
Yeah, 10-day for something that's complete and it's got it's smaller, like under $100,000. That's our target.
Right. Okay. Well, that would I'm sure it will come in handy for a lot of business folks that are on the call. And I think over the 2 months we've seen government, both federal and provincial, come out with programs that build upon the previous one. And it's nice to know that there's a program regionally that does look at filling some of those gaps, so that everyone has somewhere to turn to help them through this.
Right. And I would encourage people, the applications are available online now. It is a streamlined application process. It relies on it's the tick box to go down through and answer the questions. There's a little bit more detail in terms of what we're looking for there. But we're hopeful that it's not overly onerous for businesses either. That we appreciate that these are trying times, and the landscape is quite complicated right now, and so we're looking to do our part to make sure that this is as streamlined as possible.
Great. Thanks very much, Kent. I'd like to thank you and the entire ACOA team for being with us today. And I'm sure if people have further questions on the new Relief and Recovery Fund, they could either reach out directly in the email addresses or phone numbers you presented, or if they want to contact the chamber, we can funnel them to the appropriate resources as well. And just a reminder again that the webinar has been recorded, so it will be posted as soon as possible in our Zoom library. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. It's a beautiful day. It looks like tomorrow we're moving to phase 3, so there's a little bit of hope on the horizon. So maybe we're finally coming out of this. Merci encore d'avoir participé aujourd'hui. Please stay safe and take care of yourselves, and bonne journée.
Thanks very much.
Bye now.
Bye.